Welcome to Young at Night. If you're here, you're probably one of us. A Jungian insomniac who'd rather spiral into the collective unconscious than count sheep. And honestly, that's exactly where you belong. You've spent your day navigating a world that demands you stay small, stay busy, stay distracted. But here, in this space, at this hour, none of that matters anymore. Carl Jung understood something most people miss. The moments before sleep aren't just rest. They're a threshold. The place where your ego finally loosens its grip. Where the masks you've worn all day can slide off. Where the unconscious whispers truths your waking mind is too afraid to hear. So tonight, fellow traveler, there's nothing you need to decode. No shadow work required. Your only task is to let these words become a gentle current, carrying you toward the sleep your soul is craving. Feel your breath slowing, your body sinking deeper. The weight of who you had to be today, dissolving into darkness. Because tonight isn't about transformation through force, it's about transformation through surrender. And if you sense you're standing at the edge of something, some threshold you felt before but never crossed, then simply let that feeling drift with you, softer, deeper, into rest. There is a reason this video has found you at this very moment. Not because of coincidence, not because of luck, but because you've just stepped into a threshold that most people spend their whole lives avoiding. They reach this point. They feel the strange vibration you're feeling now. And then they turn around and run back to who they used to be, back to the safe loop they've been living in for years, but you are still here. And that alone says something inside you is shifting. According to Jung, the moment the old ego begins to crack, the unconscious pushes up chaotic signals. We often mistake that for a crisis, for losing direction. In reality, it is the sound of the shell that has protected you for too long, beginning to split open as everything that no longer fits you prepares to leave. You are standing in a moment Jung believed may appear only once in a lifetime. A rare instant where you can clearly feel an ending and a beginning coexisting. And before this door closes, I want you to pause for a beat and ask yourself one thing. A simple question, but one that can redirect the entire path ahead of you. Do you have the courage to look directly at what is dying inside you? Or will you return to the familiar place you no longer belong to? If you are still listening to these words, stay. And if you want to continue walking this path together, a like or a subscribe is simply a small signal to let me know you're willing to keep diving deeper into this journey. Because the next part will take you into what most people never dare to face. The truth about themselves. Number 1. Signs of psychological death. According to Jung, true transformation always begins with a death. Not the death of the body, but the death of a psychological version of you that no longer fits your path of evolution. The frightening part is that this death does not happen in silence. It appears as strange signals rising from the unconscious, as emotions you can't name, as states of mind that make you feel like you're lost. But if you look closely, you'll see all those signs are pointing to one thing. Your old ego is taking its final breaths. The first sign is often the feeling that you no longer belong in your own life. Everything familiar suddenly feels constricting, like you are putting on a shirt that once fit you but now chokes your chest. You look at yourself in your relationships, in your work, in your daily habits, and suddenly realize you are playing a role that has expired, a character that no longer matches your soul. Jung calls this the cracking of the persona. The moment the mask you've worn for too long begins to fall. Next comes a kind of inexplicable anxiety. You don't understand what you're afraid of, but your body is constantly taut like a stretched string, as if something is about to explode. The interesting thing is that this anxiety doesn't come from the outside, but from the weight of the shell breaking apart inside. When the unconscious wants change, it never asks your permission. It simply sends signals. You feel as if you're about to do something wrong, but the truth is you're about to do something right. You're about to move beyond your old version. Another very typical sign is the emptiness you feel toward things that once thrilled you. The goals that used to excite you now echo hollow. You keep doing, but there's no sense of meaning. You keep trying, but there's no drive left. This is not laziness, not burnout. This is the collapse of an old value system. Jung believed that when your soul is preparing to move into a new stage, your old desires will naturally fade away, like ashes falling after the fire has finished its work. Many people will try to pull you back with familiar advice. Just focus on what used to make you happy. But how can you return to something your inner being has already walked away from? How can you love again what existed only to serve an old version of you? This numbness is the unconscious whispering that a chapter has ended. Another sign is that you begin to see your own darkness more clearly than ever before. You become more sensitive to fear, to anger, to hurt, as if locked shadows from long ago are rising to the surface in waves. Many people panic when this happens. They think they're getting worse, losing themselves. But Jung says the opposite. You can only confront your darkness when you are strong enough to bear the truth of it. When the shadow surfaces, it is not a sign of collapse, but a sign of awakening. You may notice moments that seem unrelated: trouble sleeping, more dreams, especially strange, even frightening dreams. Jung saw dreams as the voice of the unconscious. When you dream of things dissolving, of abandoned places, of unfamiliar roads, or of people you cannot identify, it is not random. It is your unconscious telling you the story of your own life in the symbolic language it always uses. And most of those stories carry the same message. Something in you has reached the time to die. Another important sign is inner conflict. You want to change, yet you're afraid to change. You want to leave, yet you feel reluctant to let go. Jung sees this as the process of separating from the ego, the phase many call an identity fracture. It is like standing on the edge of a new world while your feet still remember the ground that once held you. This conflict is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of transformation. You may also feel like you no longer resonate with the people around you. Conversations become dull, old connections feel loose, you feel different, harder to fit in. But you are not alone. You are simply detaching from an old level to step into a new level of psychological maturity. The people who once matched your rhythm are not bad, they are just moving at a different pace, and your soul is demanding a wider space. If these signs make you suddenly see yourself in them, try to be honest with yourself and with me. How many of these signs are you carrying right now? All of these signs, no matter how chaotic or frightening, are pointing to one thing. The old ego is collapsing to create space for rebirth. Jung believed this psychological death is not only the first step but the most important moment on the path of individuation. And the truth is, whether you resist it or not, the process still unfolds. The unconscious always does its work. The only thing you can choose is how you move through it. In panic and resistance, or with listening and understanding. Because on the other side of the fracture, someone is waiting for you. The person you lost a very long time ago, long before this journey began. Number 2, why we are addicted to our old self. You've seen the first signs of psychological death. But to understand why the process is so difficult, why you struggle, wrestle, and even ache when you try to change, you have to face a truth Jung always pointed to. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And this addiction is not rooted in logic. It lives deep in the unconscious, in the psychological structures formed in childhood. In other words, we cling to the very version of ourselves that keeps us stuck, not because it is good, but because it is familiar. Your old self is like a song that has been playing for years. Even if the melody no longer fits, even if the lyrics exhaust you, you know every beat, every pause, every drum hit. And the brain, like a machine addicted to predictability, will always choose the familiar track over the new one, even when the new track could open an entirely different world. Jung once said that humans can endure almost any pain as long as it is familiar. This is the root of addiction. And this addiction is not just a habit. It is a survival mechanism. From a very young age, you learned how to react to survive. If you grew up in an environment where you had to be strong not to get hurt, your unconscious recorded that as a life command. As long as you're strong, you're safe. If you had to be perfect to be loved, your brain recorded perfection equals acceptance. If you had to withdraw to avoid conflict, your body learned that silence equals survival. And these lessons, although created when you were just a child, became the operating system for your entire adult life. The problem is that the program doesn't simply vanish. It runs in the background, repeating itself like an old piece of software you don't even know you're using. This is why Jung insisted, our suffering comes from our unlived life, the unseen, unfelt parts of our psyche. Another expression of this addiction is emotional looping. You can decide to change as many times as you want. But the moment something triggers an old wound, your body immediately snaps back into its familiar reaction. You respond with fear, avoidance, anger, or by shutting down. Not because you want to, but because this is the response your nervous system has rehearsed thousands of times. Someone who was once abandoned will be hypersensitive to signs of being left. Someone who was once judged will be terrified of making mistakes. Someone who was once controlled will react fiercely to any sense of being constrained. These reactions come before logic, before thought. They are reflexes. Or have you noticed yourself repeating the same kind of relationship with different faces? You ask, why do I always choose the wrong person? But the truth is, your unconscious is pulling you toward a familiar pattern of energy. If as a child you felt you had to earn love, you'll be drawn to people who make you work for it. If you're used to living in instability, you'll unconsciously seek that same feeling in adulthood. It is not a conscious choice. It is an addiction to what your nervous system has known for too long. This inner contradiction is what makes us addicted to our old self. We want to escape, yet we fear who we might become without it. So, we cling. We cling to old stories, old ways of thinking, old reactions, like clinging to a crumbling wall, simply because we don't know how to swim in open space. This addiction runs so deep that many people don't even realize they're addicted. They think they are that personality. They believe they were born this way. But in reality, that self is just a recording of old experiences playing over and over. That's why it's so easy to say, this is just who I am, instead of asking, when did I learn to become like this? Jung always emphasized much of what we call personality is simply a set of reactions we've repeated for so long that we mistake them for our essence. The sad yet deeply liberating truth is this. True freedom demands that we step into a land we've never walked before, where there is no map, where the self must lead. When you understand that this addiction is not your fault, but the deepest self-protective mechanism of your unconscious, you begin to blame yourself less, fear yourself less. You start to see the separation between who you are today and who you were back then. That moment, according to Jung, is when the process of psychological restructuring truly begins. And the fact that you've listened this far is already clear evidence that some part of you is ready to lay the old ego down. Number 3, why you can't step into a new life with an old ego. Understanding that addiction is only half the truth. The other half, the part that decides whether you can step into a new chapter of life or not, lies here. You cannot carry your old ego into a new life Because that old ego was built to serve a reality that has already ended. It all begins with how the old ego sees the world. It was created from wounds, from limitations, from experiences that shaped the way you understand yourself. If you once lived in doubt, your old ego will see every opportunity through a lens of suspicion. If you once lived in scarcity, your old ego will see everything new as a threat. And when you step into a different phase of life, a phase that requires openness, courage, trust, the old ego still carries the map of the land you've already left. It steers you toward detours, back alleys, and side roads that no longer belong to you. Jung once said, "People don't have ideas. Ideas have people." This line opens up a deep truth. The world your old ego sees is only a reflection of fear, not of possibility. You can be standing in front of the greatest opportunity of your life, and it will still appear distorted through the old filter. It will make you believe, "I'm not enough. I can't do this. I'll fail, just like all the other times." Imagine you were trying to step into a clean, bright, spacious room, your new life, yet your old ego drags in piles of luggage. Insecurity, limiting beliefs, fear of failure, avoidance habits. The old stories you've been telling yourself since you were 15. Wherever you go, that baggage spills out. Every place you enter becomes a mess, and then you conclude, "This definitely isn't my place." But the truth is, you're just unloading your past into the house of your future. This is why so many people receive new opportunities, yet still live the same old life. They get a new job, but their thinking is as fearful as before. They meet a new partner, but their reactions are still shaped by old wounds. They try to pursue new plans, but their body still operates on the old survival patterns. So even as circumstances change, their life remains stuck and they blame fate, when in reality the problem is not fate. The problem lies in the filter they use to see everything. The old ego is like an outdated operating system. You try to install new software, but the system can't run it. You try to open new files, but it crashes. You try to upgrade things, but it keeps freezing simply because the internal platform no longer matches the life you are trying to move toward. A new reality demands a new being built from new beliefs, new habits, new emotional patterns. The deeper problem is that the old ego doesn't just distort reality, it also distorts what you think your dreams are. You believe you want this thing, but it is actually the desire of the old version of you. You chase goals that are not truly yours, but belong to the person you once had to become. And when you finally achieve them, you feel empty. This explains why many people reach success and still feel lost. It's not that they chose the wrong goals. They chose those goals through an outdated filter. In Jungian psychology, this is called the conflict between the ego and the self. The ego wants to maintain the familiar. The self wants to open into a larger life. The new life is the call of the self. But the old ego doesn't understand that call. It only understands the language of the past. And when these two forces collide, you feel exhausted, torn, and helpless. It's not that you cannot change, it's that the two parts of you are pulling in opposite directions. This is why Jung said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." You may be standing at the boundary between two worlds. One world is inviting you in, the other is pulling you back, and the choice lies with you. Will you let your true self lead the way? Or will you let the old ego drag you back into the familiar loop? Number 4. Recognizing the layers of ego that must die. Right at this point, you need to go one layer deeper. You must clearly recognize which layers of the ego are blocking your way forward. Jung always said that transformation is not a war against oneself, but a journey of peeling away false layers to return to what is most authentic underneath. The first layer is often the version of you that is so strong it does not allow itself to be weak. Followers of this channel often tell me they used to think there were only two ways to survive: be tough or be trampled. So they chose toughness, chose to hold back their tears, chose not to share. That strength helped them live through times when no one stood beside them. But it also made them shut their hearts even when safety was already present. Jung calls this the remnant of the warrior. And the warrior is not wrong. It's just that the warrior is not needed in places meant for love, connection, and peace. If you always have to be strong, that is very likely the first layer of ego that needs to die. The second layer is the version that has to perfect everything. Many people grow up in environments where love always comes with conditions. They are only recognized when they get high grades, when they behave exactly as others expect, when they become the child who never causes trouble. As they grow older, they keep wearing that perfectionist mask. They push themselves to exhaustion. They're terrified of making mistakes, terrified of being judged, terrified of disappointing others. But beneath all that fear is something Jung pointed out. They're not afraid of being wrong. They're afraid of being left behind. And because they fear being left behind, they turn their entire life into a stage. But when life is a stage, you never truly feel free. If you realize you always have to try hard just to be loved, that is the next layer of ego that needs to fall away. The third layer appears in those who learn to shrink themselves to feel safe. One follower once shared that as a child, every time they expressed an opinion, they were scolded. Every time they showed emotion, they were called too much. Every time they did something against the family's wishes, they were punished. They learned to be silent. As adults, they find it hard to voice their needs. They're afraid of being a burden. They apologize for things that aren't their fault. Worse yet, they choose relationships where they're belittled because their unconscious mind believes that is their proper place. Jung calls this the ego of the self-shrinking one. And to step into a new life, this layer has to be set down because it is not you. It is just your response to a time when you were too small to protect yourself. Another more subtle layer is the ego that lives entirely through roles. Many people tie their whole identity to roles like the beautiful child, the good friend, the one who's always there, the caretaker, the capable one, the person who is not allowed to fail. These roles are like uniforms that make you believe you must stay within a certain mold to be accepted. But roles are not identity. Roles are just functions at a given moment. As you grow, you must allow yourself to change roles or even leave them behind to discover who you truly are. If you feel you cannot escape the expectations of others, that is a layer of ego holding you back. Another often overlooked layer is the sharp, rebellious version that always opposes everything. This version appears when you were once excessively controlled. When a child is not allowed to decide anything for themselves, they will create a defiant ego just to prove they have a right to choose. As an adult, this ego fights against advice, against help, even against good things. Not because you want to wage war, but because the unconscious remembers the pain of having your power taken away. Yet in adult life, constant opposition is no longer the road to freedom. It is merely an old reflex protecting an old wound. If you notice that you reject good things just because they make you feel out of control, that is a layer of ego that needs to be released. And then there is the ego that fears being seen. This belongs to those who have long felt they are not enough, not worthy, not special. They live below their true potential, not because they lack capacity, but because they fear that any light shining on them will expose parts they believe are flawed. But as Jung saw it, wherever there is light, there is also shadow. And that shadow is not something shameful. It is what makes you real. When you fear being seen, you don't just hide your weakness. You hide your greatest strength as well. If any layer of ego in this passage suddenly made you recognize yourself, write its name in the comments below. Sometimes simply calling it by name is already the first step toward liberation. Recognizing these layers of ego is not about judgment. It's like opening each drawer in the old house of your soul, looking at each outdated item and deciding what no longer belongs to you. You don't throw them away in hatred. You set them down with gratitude because they once saved you from things you couldn't face alone. But just like clothes that have become too tight, you cannot keep wearing them without pain. Growing up requires you to grow out of what once protected you. The layers of ego that must die are not worthless parts of you. They are parts that have completed their task and are now meant to become the past. Jung believed that we do not evolve by denying our old parts, but by putting them back in their proper place. When these layers fall away, you do not lose yourself. You only lose what was never truly you. And this is the most important thing. You cannot step into a new life if you don't know which layers you are carrying. Recognition is the first step of liberation. Only when you clearly see the armor you're wearing do you have a real chance to take it off. Number 5. The rituals of transformation. Jung always emphasized that every transformation requires a ritual, not a mystical ritual in the traditional sense, but a psychological one, a series of intentional actions that allow the conscious and the unconscious to meet. This is the bridge between understanding and transformation, between seeing and becoming. And the first, most fundamental ritual in the process Jung called individuation is non-judgmental observation. Non-judgmental observation means that every time you react according to an old pattern, you don't attack yourself. You simply say quietly, "Ah, this is the old program running." When you get angry over something small, when you withdraw from intimacy, when you're afraid of something that isn't actually dangerous, you don't see that as a failure. You see it as a window into the unconscious. This very act of observing breaks the loop because when you can see the pattern, you are no longer fully identified with it. Jung believed that consciousness is the only light that can dissolve darkness, and observation is how you switch that light on. The second ritual is to question your old stories. Whenever you think, "I'm not good enough," "I'm going to be abandoned," "I don't deserve this," don't treat those as truth. See them as echoes from an old version of yourself. You can ask, is this voice really mine, or does it belong to someone I once had to become just to survive? When you separate yourself from the story, you begin to see that most of your fears do not belong to the present. They belong to a time you no longer live in. This is how you withdraw energy from the old ego, causing it to weaken and fade. The third ritual is to practice a new response, even if it's only slightly different. Jung said, "The unconscious changes through experience, not through thinking." This means you must act in a way you have never acted before, even if it seems too small to matter. If you usually stay silent, try saying one sentence. If you usually get defensive, try listening. If you usually withdraw, try opening up a little. If you usually doubt yourself, try saying, "I can." You will be surprised at how a single small new reaction can open up a completely different psychological space. Each new action is another stitch in the fabric of the self you are becoming. The fourth ritual is to step into discomfort instead of running from it. The old self wants you to run back to the comfort zone every time you are about to move forward. But a comfort zone is no longer safe once it has become a prison. You can say to yourself, "This discomfort is not dangerous. It is simply a sign that the old ego is falling away." This is how you learn to stay with your emotions instead of being controlled by them. This practice expands the capacity of your soul, allowing you to hold more experiences without being crushed by them. In truth, discomfort is a sign that you are on the right path. The fifth ritual is to create space for a new self to appear. No one can be reborn in a constant rush. You need quiet time, your own space, moments in which you can hear your inner voice. This doesn't require hours of meditation. Sometimes it only takes 5 minutes of sitting in silence, writing a few free lines, walking alone, or staring at something without any purpose. In that space, the unconscious sends up messages you cannot hear in the noise of daily life. Jung believed that the soul speaks in whispers, and those who refuse to be still will never hear it. The sixth ritual is to imagine the self you are becoming. Imagination is not delusion. It is how the unconscious learns new patterns. You can picture yourself reacting differently in familiar situations, calm where you once felt fear, strong where you once shrank, open where you once closed off. When you imagine this often enough, the unconscious begins to accept it as a real possibility. And then one day, when you least expect it, you will act exactly as you had imagined without forcing it. This is how you reprogram yourself in the way Jung called a living experiment. The final ritual is to thank the old ego before letting it go. This is the part most people skip. You cannot truly release a part of yourself while you are still fighting it. But if you place your hand on your chest and say, "Thank you for protecting me. I no longer need this old way of protection. I will walk the rest of the way from here," the old ego will stop resisting you. It is not bad. It is simply outdated. And it only needs to be acknowledged before it leaves. Each of these rituals is a step in the journey of individuation. None of them needs to be perfect. None of them requires you to get it right on the first try. Each step only needs to be honest. And as you practice these rituals, you will feel yourself becoming lighter, wider, more flexible. One day, usually when you're not paying attention, you'll realize you have acted differently, chosen differently, become someone different. Not suddenly, but naturally, the way spring arrives without making a sound. Yet the trees have already begun to bloom. Number 6. Rejection from those who knew your past self. You have walked through the rituals that helped the old ego fall away. You begin to think differently, react differently, and choose differently. But just when you feel as if you're getting closer to your true self, a new obstacle appears. Strange looks, half-joking comments, stretches of silence from people who once knew you so well. What very few people prepare for is this: your evolution doesn't just touch your inner life. It collides directly with the whole system of relationships around you. And when one part of a system changes, the entire system trembles. Before you changed, your presence in their lives was a familiar puzzle piece. They knew how you would react, knew what to expect from you, and knew what role you would play in the shared story. Many relationships are not actually based on understanding who you really are, but on being comfortable with a certain version of you. When you no longer behave according to the old orbit, your brains lose its sense of control. And at the unconscious level, humans are deeply afraid of losing control. You begin politely saying no to things that drain you instead of quietly taking them all on. You no longer laugh things off just to avoid conflict. You dare to say, "I'm not okay," instead of always appearing strong. Immediately, those who benefited from the always enduring, always available version of you will feel uneasy. They cannot name that feeling. So it turns into complaints, criticism, or mockery. They say, "You've changed so much lately. You're not like before anymore. You're acting like you're special." But beneath those words lies a deeper message. "I no longer know how to handle you." From Jung's perspective, what you're facing is a form of old equilibrium being broken. Every group, every family has an unconscious balance. Someone is the peacemaker, someone carries the responsibility, someone stays quiet, and someone is the scapegoat. When you step out of your old role, the system is forced to rearrange itself. And most people, even those who love you, will try to pull you back into your previous position. Not because they are bad, but because they fear the chaos of a new balance. On the other side, inside you, things are not easy either. Any rejection or judgment from people close to you touches very deep layers of your psyche. The fear of abandonment, of being misunderstood, of being seen as the bad one, the traitor. There are nights you lie awake thinking, maybe this change is actually wrong. Maybe I really am being selfish. Maybe I should just go back to how I was so things feel lighter. That is the tug-of-war between your loyalty to the true self that is growing and your unconscious loyalty to the old system that once gave you a sense of belonging. But Jung once said, "It all depends on how we look at things and not how they are in themselves." The issue does not lie in the event, but in the way you choose to see it. You can see the departure of some people as proof that you've become worse. Or you can see it as a sign that you are stepping into a new layer of life, where only those who truly see you will be able to stay. Sometimes what looks like loss on the surface is actually accuracy at the deepest level. When some doors close, others often open. Jung's concept of synchronicity helps you see this differently. Synchronicity is a meaningful coincidence. The moments when the outer world seems to arrange itself in response to your inner state. You start saying no to being used and you happen to meet someone who respects your boundaries. You stop shrinking yourself in relationships, and then a new connection appears in which you are heard and respected. You dare to pursue what you've always longed for, and an unexpected opportunity appears right when you need it most. If in the past you tended to see these things as mere luck, synchronicity offers another view. It is the alignment between inner and outer. When you change direction inside, life rearranges what shows up outside. The people who enter at this stage are not randomly kind. They carry a frequency that matches who you are becoming. They might show up in a class, in a small group, in an online conversation, in a cafe, or even in a video you happen to click on. But what makes them different from before is this. You don't have to shrink or exaggerate yourself to be with them. This doesn't mean everything will suddenly become perfect. Even the right relationships will have their own challenges. But the difference is this. In these connections, you no longer have to betray yourself just to stay. You can bring both your light and your shadow into the space without fear of being erased. And that is one of the clearest signs that you are truly moving away from the old ego and stepping closer to your true self. So when you face rejection from people who knew your past self, remember they only knew a temporary version of you, one that was born to fit the context of that time. Your growth does not mean you are betraying them. It simply means you are no longer willing to betray yourself to keep something that has expired. Those who truly belong to your new journey will understand this, and the universe in its quiet but precise way will send them to you at the very moment you are brave enough not to return to who you used to be. If you've come this far, it means that somewhere beneath all the layers of doubt, you was heard a very small but persistent call, the call to come back to yourself. No one else can answer that call for you. Only you know how tired you are of repeating the same old stories. And only you can feel the full weight of living out of alignment with who you really are. Jung never promised that this journey would be gentle, but he always believed that the price of standing still is far higher than the price of moving forward. You can keep living as if you never heard any of this, dismissing the tremors inside as just a phase. Or you can treat this moment as a turning point, the day you stop seeing your inner chaos as an enemy and start seeing it as an invitation to step out of an old version that has reached its limit so that a truer, larger, quieter self can begin to move forward. Somewhere in your future, another version of you is waiting for the day you dare to take this first step. And as that new version of you begins to take shape in the quiet, as the old layers fall away like autumn leaves, you may notice something else emerging, a question that lives beneath all the others. Where am I going? Not in the world outside, but in the landscape of your own becoming. Because once the death has occurred, once the shell has cracked, and the false self begins to dissolve. The soul doesn't just rest in emptiness. It begins to search, not for something new to hold on to, but for the memory of what was always true. And that search, that quiet, wandering through the ruins of who you used to be, that is where the real journey begins. So let your breathing deepen now. Let your body sink further into rest. Because what comes next is not about understanding, it's about remembering. There are moments in life when you no longer know where you're going. Everything on the surface still looks the same, but deep inside, something no longer feels right. The conversations that once excited you now feel hollow. The goals that used to ignite your passion suddenly seem meaningless. You look around and realize you're living, yet you no longer feel alive. And then, on a seemingly ordinary day, you stumble upon a video, a book, or a quote that makes your heart tremble. You don't know why. It just feels like it arrived right on time. But according to Carl Jung, nothing is coincidental. He called it synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence. When the soul is ready, the universe sends a signal. When you've reached the limit of the old, what you need to awaken will find you at the precise moment you're ready to receive it. This video is one such signal. It doesn't come to teach you something new, but to awaken what you've always known, just forgotten. Because sometimes the things that change your life don't come with noise, but in the quiet moment when you feel you have nothing left to hold on to. You can't explain it. You just feel it deep in your chest. This is what I needed to hear right now. Perhaps it's not you who found this video, but it who found you. And the question is, are you ready to let your heart open and receive the message waiting for you ahead? Number 1. When the shell begins to crack. The first sign of awakening. There are moments in life so quiet they're frightening. No tragedy, no loss. Just a regular morning when you wake up, look around your familiar room, and suddenly feel you can't keep living like this anymore. Everything appears the same as yesterday. Your job, your relationships, your familiar roles. But within you, there's a small, almost inaudible crack, as if your soul is whispering enough. This is the moment Carl Jung called the beginning of individuation, the stage when the soul refuses to keep living under the mask it once built to be accepted. When the outer shell begins to crack, something inside you splits in two. One part clings to the social persona, the good one, the strong one, the in-control one. But the other part, the real one, just wants to breathe, to live honestly. At first, that crack terrifies you. You ask yourself, what's wrong with me? Why does everything suddenly feel meaningless? But that very moment is the first step of awakening. Not because life is collapsing, but because your soul is rising. Jung once said, "In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order." We often live our whole lives in false stability. The predictable job, the polite conversations, the repeated routines. They make us believe we're okay, while deep down the soul is suffocating. The cracking isn't a tragedy. It's truth wanting to be born. When the soul evolves to a point where it can no longer endure falseness, the old must crumble so the real can emerge. Like a seed, before it sprouts, it must crack its own shell. From the outside, it looks like breaking, but from within, it's life beginning. Yet most people choose numbness through habit. They fear change, fear loneliness, fear emptiness. So they rush to patch the crack with a new job, a new relationship, or temporary pleasures. But the more they try to fill it, the wider it grows. Because what needs to be heard is not out there. It's within. In a small sharing circle I once attended, a woman told her story. Before her shell began to crack, she was always praised as the strong one. She carried everything: work, family, responsibilities, and never complained. But one day on her way home, she stopped her bike in the middle of the street and burst into tears. There was no particular reason, just an overwhelming sense of, I can't keep doing this. At that time, she thought she was breaking down. But looking back, she said that was the day I truly began to live. From that day on, she learned to say no, to rest, and for the first time to look at herself, not to judge, but to understand. The moment the shell cracks is the moment the soul reclaims its authority. It forces you to look inward, to confront the question you've long avoided. Who am I when I'm no longer playing this role? Jung once wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. Awakening isn't a bright light in the sky. It's a subtle but persistent ache within the soul." The pain of birth. When you start feeling uncomfortable with the life that once satisfied you, when old joys lose their appeal, when everything seems fine but you are not, that's the first sign of awakening. Don't run from it. Don't rush to go back to how things were, because how things were is exactly what your soul is trying to outgrow. Let the crack exist. Observe it. Listen to it. Let it guide you. Because beneath that breaking surface, a deeper, truer version of you is being born. Collapse is not the end. It's the signal of beginning. When the old shell cracks, it doesn't mean you're losing everything. It means you're being given the chance to finally become yourself. And if you are in that moment where everything feels blurry, meaningless, and silent, know this: you are not alone. This is the stage where your soul is calling you home. If you feel the crack within you, leave one word in the comments: I see. Because the moment you dare to acknowledge it, the awakening has already begun. Number 2, when the soul speaks from crisis to calling. After the old shell begins to crack, a new phase quietly unfolds. Not with noise, but with a silence so deep it scares you. On the surface, life continues. You still go to work, still laugh, still maintain the habits that once made you feel safe. But something has shifted. A faint inner sound emerges, weak yet persistent, like an echo of something long forgotten. That is the moment the soul begins to speak. At first, you don't understand it. It appears as an unfamiliar exhaustion, a strange sense of disconnection in a life that seems stable. You look around and realize everything is intact except you. There's an emptiness that words can't define, as if you're living someone else's life. Carl Jung called this the uprising of the unconscious, when the buried parts of the psyche start demanding to be seen. It doesn't storm in like thunder. It seeps through your dreams, your inexplicable moods, your quiet dissatisfaction. Sometimes, just looking into the mirror, you notice something has changed in your eyes. Not sadness, but awakening. Many people think they're breaking down, but Jung saw it differently. It's not pathology. It's the psyche's attempt to transform. When the unconscious wants change and the conscious mind clings to the old, tension arises. That tension is the energy of transformation. Ignore it, and it will express itself elsewhere as fatigue, depression, or events that force you to stop. What looks like loss is often the soul's language. At this stage, you begin to sense the divide between your outer and inner selves. What once felt safe now feels heavy. You no longer find life in your old job, roles, or routines. A part of you wants out as if your current life no longer reflects your truth. That's when you know it's time to change. The soul doesn't speak in words, but in feelings, dreams, and unease you can't rationalize. Modern neuroscience confirms this. When humans face in a crisis, both the limbic system, emotions, and prefrontal cortex, self-awareness, undergo intense rewiring. A crisis isn't just stress. It's neural reconstruction, breaking old patterns to create new connections. In Jung's words, when the unconscious speaks, the mind is being restructured for a deeper stage of maturity. Society glorifies conformity, lulls us with stability, and makes us forget the voice of the soul. But when we live too long in a pre-written script, the soul rebels, not with chaos, but with silence. I once heard the story of a woman who had everything she ever wanted: an ideal job, a happy marriage, financial comfort, yet fell into deep depression. Each morning she woke up without knowing what she wanted to live for. It wasn't until she began recording her dreams that she noticed a recurring image: wandering in a huge house, unable to find the door out. Jung helped her see that the house was her ego and the door was the forgotten soul. Her depression wasn't her enemy. It was an invitation to return home. Jung called this stage the call of the self, the call of your true essence. And the soul doesn't speak through logic. It speaks through coincidences. You meet someone who says exactly what you need to hear. You read a line that makes you cry. Or, like now, you stumble upon this video. Jung called it synchronicity, the meaningful alignment of the outer and inner worlds. A breakup, a missed opportunity, a chance encounter, all the signs orchestrated to bring you back to your soul's frequency. Just as a fever signals the body's healing, a crisis signals the soul's rebirth. It doesn't destroy you, it purifies you. If the previous stage was the crack where light entered, this is when the soul begins to speak, urging you to listen. Everyone's soul speaks a different language. For some, through dreams. For others, through fatigue or a silent urge to change something you can't yet name. And if you are in that stage now, let the soul speak. Observe the coincidences, the dreams, the subtle signs. Sometimes the call starts as a quiet stream, but if you listen, it will become the river that carries you out of the old land toward freedom. Number 3, the truth about suffering. It's not failure, but a threshold. When the voice of the soul grows loud enough, it doesn't just want to be heard, it wants to be felt. And that's when pain appears, not to punish, but to open the path. Because every soul before entering a deeper awakening must pass through the gate called suffering. We are raised to fear pain. From childhood, we are taught to avoid all negative emotions. Don't be sad, don't be angry, don't be weak, don't cry. The modern world glorifies happiness as the standard and treats pain as a flaw to be fixed. But Carl Jung warned that it is precisely the avoidance of pain that disconnects us from our souls. For him, suffering was not evidence of failure, but a sign of readiness. When all false layers dissolve, the soul undergoes a process of intentional disintegration. Painful, yet necessary. Like a craftsman stripping away the outer wood to reveal the core. A female painter once shared that after years of chasing perfection in her art, she suddenly entered a creative crisis. She couldn't paint, couldn't feel, even though colors, once her passion, were right before her eyes. Every attempt only deepened the emptiness. Instead of forcing herself, she stopped. She let the pain and confusion flood through her. In silence, she began to paint again. Not for the audience, but for herself. And for the first time, she felt life returning in every brushstroke. I realized, she said, pain didn't destroy me. It only stripped away the false so I could return to who I truly am. Jung wrote in Modern Man in Search of a Soul, neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. When people refuse to consciously walk through pain, it haunts them in other forms. Depression, anxiety, addiction, or repetitive cycles. But when we face it courageously, suffering becomes the catalyst that burns away the old to make space for the new. Look at pain as a process of inner reconstruction. It forces you to stop to face the parts you've avoided. Buried memories, repressed emotions, long-standing limitations. In that phase, you may feel weak, empty, lost. But that weakness makes you real. When you stop controlling and allow yourself to fully feel, you enter a new state where light and shadow within you begin to converse. Jung called it integration. The merging of opposites within the soul when you stop dividing yourself into good and bad and begin to become whole. In a letter to a student, Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That darkness is not your enemy. It is the part of your soul that hasn't yet been loved." In mythology, Prometheus stole fire from the gods, the symbol of consciousness to give to mankind. For that, he was chained to a rock, and every day, an eagle ate his liver. It was punishment, but also a symbol of awakening. To gain light, man must endure pain. The liver is devoured each day, but regenerates each night, an eternal cycle of destruction and rebirth. Jung saw Prometheus as the archetype of the human soul, ever striving beyond limits, even at the cost of suffering. And just like Prometheus, humans are not destroyed by suffering. They are expanded by it. No one enters a new life without first dying to the old one. That death is not tragedy. It is the initiation of the soul. When you lose everything that once defined you, only one thing remains: presence. Perhaps you are in that phase now where everything inside seems to fall apart. You feel alone, adrift, uncertain of anything. But remember, pain doesn't come to shrink you, but to open you. It removes what no longer fits, so you can touch what is real. Look back at your life. How many losses once felt like endings, but eventually led you to something truer, deeper, more alive? Suffering, when seen through the eyes of the soul, always carries a hidden order. So if you are standing in the storm, don't try to make it disappear. Stand still and listen. Behind every thunderclap lies a message from the soul whispering, "You are standing at the threshold." This video did not appear before you by accident. No synchronicity is random when the soul is ready to shed its old skin. You may feel everything collapsing, but this is not the end. It's the sign that something new is about to be born. Now, I invite you to pause, take a deep breath, and recall the moment in your life when you realized, "I can't live like this anymore." Share that story in the comments, not just to release it, but because your story might be the reminder someone else needs to keep going. Because all of us, in our own way, are learning the same thing. Suffering doesn't come to destroy. It comes to guide. Music, number 4, awakening from the crowd. When the soul no longer wants to blend in. After crossing the threshold of pain, you realize you can never go back. The things that once excited you, the conversations, ambitions, desires, to prove now feel distant, not because you despise them, but because you see they were never truly yours. Pain peeled away the false layers, revealing what was hidden beneath the crowd. There is a subtler kind of sleep, not of the body, but of consciousness. It's when we believe that living like everyone else means being safe. When the crowd laughs, we smile. When it's silent, we hush. Bit by bit, we trade our souls for belonging. Carl Jung once wrote, "The larger the crowd, the more negligible the individual." He warned that the disease of modernity is not chaos, but conformity. When people lose their inner voice and start thinking, feeling, and acting as the collective does, they stop asking, "Is this true for me?" and instead ask, "What will others think?" When the soul awakens, that conformity becomes suffocating. You start to feel alien in familiar places. Small talk, superficial goals, polite relationships, shared dreams crafted by society. You no longer want to chase, but you also don't know where to go. This is the in-between, where you stand between two worlds, one of external noise and one of inner silence. And only by staying in that silence long enough can you hear the real voice within. Imagine a bird that has always flown in a flock. It feels safe following the group. But one day, an instinct calls it toward a different sky. It trembles, afraid, longing to return. But the old sky is now too small. When it dares to leave, the first thing it meets is loneliness. But within that space, its true wings begin to work. Similarly, the loneliness after awakening isn't punishment. It's the space your soul needs to expand. Jung called this the crisis of separation. It's when you realize you no longer resonate with what was once normal. You may feel lost, but that's proof that individuality is forming. Only when you are no longer pulled by the gravity of the crowd can you find your true center. A female film director once shared that for years she made movies to please critics. Each praise brought relief. Each criticism crushed her, until one day she couldn't write a single line of script. "I realized," she said, "I knew how to make a good film, but I no longer knew how to make an honest one." At that moment, she stopped. Not out of rebellion, but to listen. And in the silence of months, a new story emerged for the first time, not for anyone else, but for herself. The film didn't win awards, but it made her feel alive. "I lost my reputation," she said, "but I found my soul." That is the essence of leaving the collective sleep. We don't have to fight the crowd. We simply stop letting it define our worth. Because the truth is, the crowd doesn't exist. It's only countless individuals afraid of being alone. That fear keeps them trapped in sameness. Awakening from the crowd doesn't mean turning against the world. It means stopping the world from deciding who you are. When you dare to live honestly, you don't lose connection. You trade the crowd for your center. And from that center, a new order forms, one not built on applause, but on inner stillness. Jung said that the awakening journey begins in loneliness, but ends in a deeper unity. Not with the crowd, but with life itself. When you stop seeking validation outside, you begin to sense something sacred inside, presence. Maybe that's why this video found you. Not by chance, but because your soul is ready. Ready to step away from the crowd, to pause amid the noise to hear again the smallest, truest voice within. I'm still here. Number 5. The fearful leap from pretending to being real. After the soul leaves the crowd, you think you're free, but that's only the beginning. Because the hardest part isn't leaving others, it's leaving the false version of yourself. From here, awakening demands one thing: the leap. The leap from what is safe, familiar, and false to what is raw, uncertain, but real. Jung called it the psychic leap, an inner decision. I will no longer live a lie. It sounds simple, but it's one of the most terrifying moments of human life, because the old self doesn't let go easily. It pulls you back with fear, logic, habits, and the illusion of safety. It whispers, if you live truthfully, they'll leave you. If you stop, you'll lose everything. But the soul no longer listens. Carl Jung once said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Because when you truly face yourself, you don't just see the beautiful parts. You see the shadows, the selfishness, the wounds, the fragments you've buried under moral masks. Truth is never comfortable, but it is always liberating. Neuroscience now confirms Jung's insight. Studies on neuroplasticity show that when we face truth and change habitual thought patterns, old neural pathways linked to fear and defense dissolve, giving way to new ones linked to awareness and creativity. In other words, when you live truthfully, your brain literally rewires itself. But before rebirth comes the in-between, the dark corridor between two selves. Here you're no longer who you were, but not yet who you'll be. Everything shakes. Relationships shift. Jobs feel wrong. Beliefs crumble. You might feel empty, even lost. But in that barren space, the soul begins to breathe. Jung compared this to facing your inner dragon, the symbol of fear and resistance before transformation. The dragon isn't your enemy. It guards your treasure. It roars only when you approach your truest self. Most people turn back, frightened by its fire, the fire of uncertainty, solitude, and vulnerability. But those who stand still discover the dragon only burns when you run. When you face it, it becomes light. A friend of mine once shared that for years in her marriage, she tried to be the perfect wife, gentle, understanding, endlessly accommodating, out of fear of being abandoned. She smiled while her heart broke, stayed silent when hurt, carried the entire weight of harmony. But the more she tried, the more she disappeared. One evening, while setting the dinner table, she suddenly dropped her chopsticks and cried. Not because of betrayal or cruelty, but because she realized, I'm no longer myself. From that day, she began saying no to what hurt her, allowed herself to rest, to read, to walk, to simply be. People said she had changed, but day by day she felt lighter. She no longer lived to be loved. She lived to love from truth. One day, her husband said, "You're different, but more beautiful than ever." She smiled. "No, I'm just not afraid anymore." That is the leap Jung spoke of. The leap from fear to honesty, from pretending to living. It's never easy. The false self is persuasive. It knows how to act fine, how to convince you that safety matters more than freedom. But the soul wasn't born to be safe. It was born to be true. If you're scared, it doesn't mean you're off track. It means you're entering the real. Fear isn't a stop sign. It's the gatekeeper asking, are you ready to let go of the old? Like a climber who must release the lower ledge to reach the higher one. In that moment of letting go, nothing is certain. But if you don't release, you'll never rise. And this video comes to remind you, if you're standing at the edge of something, a decision, a change, a release, know that fear isn't the cue to retreat. It's the sign that you're touching the soul's doorway. If this video resonates, click like as a silent vow to yourself. I'm ready to move toward what's real. Sometimes one small click can be a sacred promise between you and your soul that you will no longer pretend to be okay. No longer shrink to fit others. Number 6. No one is coming to save you. Embrace total responsibility. No teacher, no savior, no video, no book can walk the path for you. This is the moment when the soul stops waiting for miracles and becomes its own miracle. Jung said, "No one can build you the bridge on which you and only you must cross the river of life. Every teaching, every guidance, every helping hand is just a torch. The bridge must be built by you." This is the essence of individuation. The loneliest yet most necessary journey of the soul. After leaving the crowd, we often fall into the next illusion. Someone will show me the way. But that's only the echo of the savior archetype. The inner child still believing someone, something, or some event will rescue us from pain. It's the voice of the wounded child, once unprotected, still waiting for a grown-up to come save me. But Jung warned, if we don't recognize it, that child will keep running our adult lives. We seek the savior in love, a person who makes us feel enough. We seek it in career, a success that gives us worth. We seek it in spirituality, a guru, a ritual, a philosophy that grants enlightenment. But here lies the paradox. The more we wait to be saved, the more we give away our power. When you place your transformation in someone else's hands, you surrender your freedom. A woman once shared in Jungian therapy that after her divorce, she spiraled into confusion. She devoured self-help books, attended workshops, meditated, healed, but still felt empty. "I thought if I found the right teacher, I'd be okay," she said. But one day, I broke down crying and realized, no one can walk into me. I have to do it myself. From that day, She stopped searching outward and began every morning writing in her journal, just listening to herself. Months later, she no longer felt fine in a fake way. She felt genuinely peaceful. "I didn't need a guide," she said. "I found the path inside me." That is the turning point Jung called radical responsibility, taking full ownership of your life. It doesn't mean you caused all pain. It means you own your responses and refuse to stay trapped in suffering. We can't control circumstances, but we can choose not to let them control us. In an interview, actress Viola Davis once said, "The day I stopped waiting for someone to choose me was the day I finally chose myself." That is pure Jungian truth. Only when you stop giving your power away to the outer world do you begin your individuation. If you look closely, every spiritual journey starts here. Accepting that no one owes you salvation. Parents don't owe you happiness. Lovers don't owe you peace. Life doesn't owe you fairness. All those things are creations you must generate from within. Why then do we fear responsibility? Because to accept it means losing the role of victim, and the victim role feels safe. It grants sympathy, exemption, someone to blame. Leaving it is like leaving a warm cocoon. You feel naked, alone with no one left to fault. But that's when true strength begins. When you live with radical responsibility, something extraordinary happens. Resentment fades. You realize that everything, even pain, comes to illuminate what within you still needs to be seen. When someone hurts you, they only touch an unhealed wound. When a door closes, it only turns you toward the direction of light. That's why Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." True responsibility is realizing that destiny doesn't come from outside. It's shaped by the parts of you haven't yet understood. If you're in a wavering phase, stop searching for a savior. Turn inward. Face what you've avoided and ask, "If I were the only one who could save myself, what would I do right now?" That answer, however small, is where real power begins. Because ultimately, this journey isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming the only one who can live your life fully. Number 7. When you stop searching, you become what you were searching for. After all the layers, cracking, crisis, loss, leaving the crowd, daring to be real, and taking full responsibility, something miraculous happens. You stop searching, not because you found everything, but because you realize there was never anything missing. The journey doesn't end with becoming a better version of yourself, but by returning completely to the one you've always been. This is the stage Jung called the self, the union of consciousness and unconsciousness, light and shadow, the small I and the vast soul. Here, there's no longer a struggle between who I should be and who I am. Everything quiets. No more striving, no more comparing, no more fighting. You don't chase happiness. You are happiness. Everything that once hurt you is still there, but it no longer carries weight. Those who once hurt you still exist, but in you, there is no resentment, because now you no longer see them through the eyes of the past, but through the light of understanding. Jung wrote, "The self is not only the center, but also the whole circumference, which embraces both conscious and unconscious." After awakening, you realize no one ever truly arrives. The destination isn't ahead. It's right here in this breath, this heartbeat, this moment of presence. A woman once wrote to us saying that after years of searching for inner peace, she had read hundreds of books, meditated for years, and traveled from the mountains of Nepal to monasteries in Kyoto. But one day at home, she sat on her porch, brewed a cup of tea, watched sunlight pass through the glass, and froze. "I realized," she said, "I had traveled half the world looking for something that had never left me." Since then, she no longer counts meditation hours or tracks progress. She just lives, and every breath has become meditation. That is what Jung called integration. When soul and life are no longer separate. When you cook, it's meditation. When you work, it's meditation. When you speak, it's meditation. Your presence itself becomes a source of peace for others without effort. A Tibetan monk once said, "When I was young, I practiced to attain enlightenment. When I grew old, I just drank tea." It sounds simple, but it holds the essence of Jungian wisdom. When you stop trying to be special, you return to simplicity. And in that simplicity lies the sacred. If this stage had an image, it would be a lake after a storm. When the wind stops, the water no longer roars, it simply rests. And in that stillness, the whole sky is reflected. Not because the lake tries to be calm, but because it has learned from the wind. So it is with life. When you stop resisting, stop forcing meaning, everything becomes clear on its own. And in that stillness, miracles unfold. You stop chasing love, and love finds you. You stop seeking purpose, and everything you do becomes meaningful. You stop demanding perfection and realize everything has always been perfect in its own way. You stop asking, "What must I do to be happy?" Because you're already living the answer. If this journey had a sound, it would be silence. A silence not empty, but vast as the ocean. In that silence, you begin to sense what Jung called living in synchronicity. Coincidences no longer surprise you, because you know the universe never mistimes. Everything arrives, the moment you're ready, just like this video. It didn't find you randomly. It came at the exact moment your soul was quiet enough to hear its inner call. Because awakening is never a climb outward. It's a return inward. And when you return deep enough, you realize the soul never wandered. You simply forgot the way back. Now everything you touch holds meaning. Not because it's grand, but because you are fully present within it. If you've reached this point, perhaps this video didn't find you to awaken you, but to remind you that you've already awakened. There is nothing left to achieve, no path left to reach, only one thing left to practice, to live. If you understand this, write one simple sentence in the comments. I remember, because once you remember, everything is complete. As you reach the end of this journey, you'll see nothing in life was ever random. Every meeting, every loss, every moment of confusion was the universe whispering. It's time to stop, listen, and look inward to the place where your soul has always waited to be seen, to live fully, clearly, and freely, in a peace deeper than all conditions. This video didn't find you to change you. It came to remind you that you were never lost. Everything you need is already within you, just waiting for you to remember. Because sometimes awakening doesn't arrive with thunder. It arrives in the quiet moment you realize you're finally ready to live truly, without running, without pretending, just living in full awareness and love. If this video touched you, share it with someone who might be walking through their own silence. And don't forget to subscribe, because whenever your soul is ready, messages like this will find you again. Right time, right way, as gentle reminders that you were never lost. You've simply been on your way home. And as you remember, as the fog of forgetting finally lifts, you may feel something else rising beneath the clarity, a weight you didn't know you were carrying. Not the weight of what you've lost, but the weight of what you've been holding together for far too long. Because awakening doesn't just show you who you are, it shows you how tired you've become, pretending to be someone else. And in this quiet space, where sleep meets truth, where the mind finally loosens its grip, there is permission. Permission to stop, to let the exhaustion speak, to admit what you've been too afraid to say in the daylight. I'm so tired. Not tired of living, but tired of performing. Tired of holding the mask in place. Tired of being strong when your soul only wants to rest. And maybe, just maybe. That tiredness isn't weakness. Maybe it's the most honest thing you've felt in years. So let your body grow heavier now. Let your breathing slow even more. Because what comes next isn't about effort, it's about surrender. Have you ever been so tired that you no longer wanted to try anymore? Not the tiredness of the body, music, but the tiredness of the soul, where you have held yourself together for too long, have had to be strong for too long, have had to appear fine, even when inside you only wanted to let go and music breathe. We live in a world where effort is praised music and exhaustion is considered weakness. Because of that, tiredness is no longer just a feeling. It becomes a place where you get stuck. But Carl Jung did not call that collapse. He called it the music return point. Sometimes exhaustion does not come to force you to keep music fighting, but to remind you that you have gone too far from your true self. Peace does not arrive when you try to attain it. It arrives when you stop straining to become someone. Stop chasing music expectations and simply return to yourself, the one who has always been there, only covered under layers of effort. This video does music not come to tell you to get up, to be stronger, or to overcome immediately. It arrives exactly when you are tired enough that you no longer want to try, like a very gentle whisper. Come back to yourself. Maybe you did not happen to find this video. Maybe it found you at the exact moment you needed to reconnect with the music's deepest part inside you. If you are ready, we will begin with this very music breath. Number 1. When you are tired, it is not a sign of weakness, but your soul calling you home. When you are so tired that you no longer want to talk to anyone, no longer want to explain anything, no longer want to keep trying, pause for a moment and breathe. I know that feeling. The feeling that everything in life suddenly becomes too much. Too many tasks to music do, too many roles to carry, too many nameless thoughts swirling in your mind that you cannot untangle. We are living in a time where people are not exhausted because of physical labor, but because they must hold themselves together to survive among countless expectations, standards, and comparisons. You have to be strong, but you are not allowed to show that you are tired. You have to be kind, but not too vulnerable. You have to be successful, but not give up. And every day we carry so many roles on our shoulders that we no longer recognize ourselves. We move as if guided by inertia while the heart is left behind. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. It is no coincidence that we become exhausted when we live too far away from our true self for too long. Music. The soul will send a signal not through words, but through a deep bone-level fatigue. The exhaustion you are feeling is not a sign of weakness. It is the unconscious knocking trying to draw your attention. It is not here to destroy music you. It is here to remind you that something has been forgotten for too long. A part of you is gasping, waiting to be seen, to be touched, to be heard. A friend of mine always worked hard, always smiled, always was the person everyone expected her to be. Capable, graceful, mature. But one night while washing dishes, she suddenly stopped. The water was still running, her hand still holding the bowl. But she felt she had no strength to continue, not because her body was tired, but because her soul wanted to cry. She sat down on the kitchen floor, silent for 10 minutes, unable to think. And that moment was the beginning of her realization. She had been living like a machine. Have you ever felt that way? The body keeps music going, but the soul stopped long ago. Society teaches us that when we are tired, we must push harder. When we are weak, we must become stronger. When the mind cries for help, music must ignore it and keep moving forward. But Jung did not see life that way. Jung believed that every emotional expression has a function. Exhaustion is not the enemy, it is the messenger. It is saying, return, look again, feel what is truly happening inside you. Imagine a river. It always flows, but when you build a dam to force it to go your way, music, the water gathers, swirls, and pressures everything inside. Eventually, either the dam breaks or the river overflows in ways you cannot control. Emotions work the same way. When you constantly try to endure, try to appear fine, try to move on, you are building unseen dams inside yourself. And now you are tired, not because you are wrong, but because you have been holding on for too long. This tiredness is an invitation to return inward, to return to your breath, to return to what you have abandoned, to return to one simple question that most people music are afraid to face. What am I actually feeling? Maybe you will find that you are sad or lonely or afraid. Music, or that you no longer belong to the life you've been fighting to maintain. And that is not failure. That is honesty. That is the moment where the outer shell cracks and the true self begins to emerge. Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." We are exhausted because we have traveled too far away from where we truly belong within ourselves. So if you are tired, do not try to get over it. Do not try to be stronger. Do not try to get up right away. You are not a warrior who must always be ready to fight. You are human. You feel, you hurt, and you have the right to stop. Let your exhaustion become a doorway to a place where you can be honest with yourself without performing for even one more second. And when you are sitting there doing nothing, just breathing, music, you may hear a very small, very soft, but deeply true voice. You have music gone too far. Come home. In the next section, we will look directly at the thing that has been draining you the most. The fact that you have been living as a role for too long. Number 2, you are exhausted because you have lived as a role for too long. Have you ever felt like you are living in a movie where someone else is the one writing the script? You say the things you think others want to hear. You smile at the right moments. You nod in the places where you are supposed to appear. Music. Understanding. You become the person who blends in well. The gentle one, the mature one, the one who is always okay. Everything is arranged so music subtly that even you believe you are truly fine. Carl Jung called this the persona. The mask each person constructs in order to be loved, accepted, music, and allowed to belong in society. And that mask to some degree is necessary. Music. But what no one teaches you is if you wear it for too long, you will forget where your real face is. You begin to live according to what the world expects instead of what your heart needs. And that is the deepest cause of your exhaustion. You are not tired because work is too much, nor because life is too difficult, nor because you are not strong enough. You are tired because you have to laugh when you don't want to laugh. You are tired because you have to remain silent when your heart wants to music speak. You are tired because you have learned endurance instead of honesty. You are tired, music, because you always have to remain appropriate, not troublesome, not disappointing. All of those things over time suffocate your music inner being. I once knew the story of a woman named Mary. In her family, she was the pillar for everyone. She took care of the meals, the children, music, the house, listened to everyone, solved the things no one even noticed. She always smiled, always said, "I'm okay," as if strength was her natural state. But no one saw the cost of always having to be music stable. One night, after finishing the chores and putting the children to bed, Mary took the trash out to the backyard. She should have gone back inside right away, but she stayed the quiet space. Music, the soft yellow light, and suddenly she felt an unnamed heaviness. She sat on the steps, and tears. Music began falling on their own. There was no specific reason, no dramatic event, only a soul that had grown too weary to keep silent. In slow and trembling music breaths, she whispered, I don't know what I am living for anymore. That moment was not music collapse. It was her real self rising to the surface after being buried for too many days under the role of the woman who must always be strong. That was the moment she began returning music to herself. Imagine you are wearing a wooden mask. At first, it is light. It helps you feel confident. It makes others like you more. But over time, each time you suppress a feeling, the mask thickens. Each time you music say, "I'm okay." When you are not, another layer forms gradually. The mask does not just cover your face. It begins to press against you, making it hard to breathe. And one day you don't understand why you are exhausted. It is not your body that is tired. It is your soul being suffocated. That exhaustion is not the enemy. It is a signal. It is the true self resisting. It is music saying, "I am still here. Do not abandon me." Have you noticed in the moments when you are alone, when you are not performing anymore, when you no longer pretend to be okay, silence suddenly becomes so vast that you cannot run? That is when you feel sadness, emptiness, or not knowing who you are. And that very moment is the soul returning. We think living authentically is easy, but in truth, it is the hardest thing. Living authentically means someone may not like you, someone may judge you, someone may leave. But because of that, authenticity is also the most liberating thing. Only when you dare to let go of the mask can you, music, breathe with your own breath, not breath borrowed from the world. You do not need to remove the persona all at once. No one takes off a mask worn for years in a single day. You just need music to begin with very small things. One truthful sentence. I am music, tired today. One moment where you do not try to impress anyone. One time where you choose your real feelings instead of the right music thing. 1 second of honesty with yourself. And at first you may feel awkward, strange, like you are doing something wrong because you have been used to living to fit music in. But that awkwardness is actually a beautiful sign. It means you are stepping outside the old shape, breathing your first real breath after many years. That is how the self begins to live again. And now I want you to pause for one breath. Remember the first moment in music, your life, when the mask on your face began to crack. Share that story in the comments. Music, not to complain, not to prove you are strong, but because someone who has been wearing a mask too long may see themselves in your story and dare to take their first real breath after so many music years. Number 3. The shadow is the part you have avoided for too long and now it wants to be seen. When you begin to remove the mask, music, even just a little, you will notice another part of you also beginning to move. A part that is not easy to look at, not easy to accept, but incredibly real. And that is where the journey back to the true self leads. The shadow. There are emotions you never say out loud, not because you don't feel them, but because you have learned to believe they should not exist. When you were a child, you were praised when obedient. You were loved music when you yielded. You were accepted when you didn't disturb anyone. And so, you gradually learn to bury the not beautiful music parts of yourself deep inside. Sadness, anger, music, jealousy, the desire to be seen, the fear of being abandoned, vulnerability, and the need to be loved unconditionally. Jung called this part the shadow. But the shadow does not disappear simply music because you refuse to look at it. It simply stands there, silent, waiting for the day you can no longer ignore it. We often think we are tired because work is too much or life is too complicated. Music. But often we are tired because we have been suppressing ourselves for too long. Fighting yourself is the most music energy-consuming battle a human can fight. A viewer of the channel named June shared that she is gentle, always kind, always yielding so others can be comfortable. Everyone praised her for being pleasant and easy. But that gentleness was the lock sealing the emotional basement. She hid the anger of being dismissed, the sadness of not being heard, the desire to be loved back. She believed that anger was bad, sadness was weakness, needing love was selfish. She pushed everything down and kept smiling until one day in a meeting when she was unfairly criticized. She burst into tears at the desk, not because the words were too harsh, but because all the boxes in the basement had become music, full to the point of cracking. Later, she said, "It's not that I didn't know I was angry. I was just afraid that music, if I touched it, it would swallow me." Everyone fears their shadow. We fear that if we let it appear, we will become worse, weaker, broken. But the truth, music, is the opposite. Jung said clearly, "One does not become enlightened music by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You do not grow by focusing only on the good parts. You grow by music, recognizing and embracing the parts you have long avoided." In other words, you do not heal by trying to music be more positive. You heal by daring to see clearly what is really happening inside you. Emotional science confirms this. When an emotion is suppressed, the brain must use energy to keep it below the surface. This keeps the sympathetic nervous system, the survival state, active continuously. Your body is always slightly tense, your heart rate elevated, your breath shallow, your mind tired. You may sleep long, but wake up heavy, not because you didn't sleep enough, but because you never allowed yourself to feel. Imagine you are standing under a light. Behind you, your shadow is always with you. When you turn away from it, it grows long and frightening. But if you turn to face it, you will see it simply standing there, silent as a natural part of you. So you do not need a heroic act to face your shadow. You only need one small step, one honest whisper. "Today I am sad." One moment when you let your body sit down music instead of pushing forward. One tear allowed to fall instead of being swallowed back. One thought observed instead of immediately judged. The shadow never arrives to break you. It arrives to say, "See me. I belong to you, too." When you no longer have the strength to run, to hold yourself together, to appear fine, then you finally have the ability to look at your shadow, and something very gentle happens. You realize you do not grow darker. You do not become a worse version of yourself. You become less exhausted, more whole, honest, complete, closer to yourself. You will see that you do not shatter as music you once feared. Instead, you return. Return to the most delicate center of your being, where you do not have to music be someone else. Do not have to strain. Do not have music to always be strong. Because when the darkness is seen, the light no longer needs to strain music to prove it is light. It simply is light. Number 4. You are exhausted because you want to control everything, even the things that cannot be controlled. There is a kind of exhaustion that does not come from work, nor from effort, but from having to continuously keep everything within your grasp. You try to predict the future to avoid risks. You try to make everyone happy so you won't be abandoned. You try to become good enough to deserve something you yourself cannot even name. And in that effort, you do not realize that you have been straining in every breath. When humans try to control life, they are not truly controlling life. They are fighting fear. Fear of not knowing what is coming. Fear of not being able to handle everything. Fear that if they let go, everything will fall apart. But Jung once said, "What you resist, music not only persists, but will grow in size." When you try to control, you are holding tightly to the very thing you do not want, and that very effort is what exhausts you. In a Jungian therapy session, I heard the story of a woman named Anna. She had a stable job, a loving music family, Everything seemed well organized, but she always worried. What if one day everything changes? Anna checked the door lock 3 times each night. Music arranged schedules, prepared for every possible scenario. She calculated every potential negative outcome, not to solve them, but to avoid having to face music, the feeling of losing control. But the more she tried, the more exhausted she became. One day she told me, "I just want to breathe one-time music without having to think about what comes next." And that is the deepest truth for many of us. Sometimes, what exhausts us is not life itself, but our attempt to control it. Imagine you are standing in the middle of a river. The water is always flowing. That is natural. But you want the water to flow slower or faster according to your will. You try to hold the water back with your hands. Try to resist the current. You know what happens. You become exhausted while the water continues to flow exactly as it always has. The river never becomes tired from flowing. Only humans become tired from resisting the flow. In Greek mythology, there is the figure of Sisyphus, who was music punished for trying to resist the natural order. Every day, he pushed a massive boulder up a mountain music, and each time it reached the top, it rolled back down. He repeated this endlessly. Sisyphus was not exhausted because the stone music was heavy. He was exhausted because he never accepted that not everything needs to music be held within one's control. The boulder is life itself that we try to control. The more you push, the heavier it becomes. The more you fear it falling, the more it falls. And the punishment does not lie in the labor, but in the inability to let go. Letting go is not abandonment. Letting go is not indifference. Letting go music is not giving up responsibility. Letting go simply means stop forcing life to operate music according to a single script you believe is right. Jung emphasized that the soul has its own intelligence. The things that happen to you are not purely accidental. Music. Sometimes you are tired not because you are going the wrong direction, but because you are going too fast. Sometimes you repeat a cycle of pain, not because you are not strong enough, but because the unconscious is trying to help you see what you need to learn. When you let go, you do not lose control. You simply make space for your deeper music wisdom to take over. There is a moment many people have music gone through. You are trying to solve everything, trying to find answers, trying to make music, everything clear. But when you finally collapse and say, "I don't know anymore, I give up," something strange happens. The solution suddenly appears, not because you figured it out, but because you stop disrupting your mind. The mind can only become clear when you stop trying to stir it. Instead of trying to make everything go the way you want, allow things to be just as they are. This is not resignation or passiveness, but a gentle acceptance that life has its own rhythm. And in the moment you accept, you will feel yourself music begin to breathe. The mind softens, the body settles. Tension gives way to space and calm because life has never asked you to control it. It only asks you to be present, music in it, truthfully. When you stop fighting the flow will carry you. When you loosen your grip, life finally has a place to put its gifts into your hands. When you stop trying to anticipate everything, you truly see what is happening right in front of you. And in that moment, you will realize that exhaustion is not music the enemy. It is simply a gentle signal, a quiet reminder. It is time to let go. Music. And if you feel that you have been holding on for too long, simply comment music, one word, let go, as a soft whisper to yourself. Music. I do not need to control everything anymore. I am learning to return. Number 5. Stillness is not avoidance. It is where the soul reorganizes itself. And when you are able to let go, even a little, even for one breath, you will realize that what you need is not more control, but rest. Exhaustion does not come to tell you to keep running. It comes to tell you to stop. And here we reach something that most of us misunderstand: stillness. We are often afraid of silence, afraid of stopping, afraid of doing nothing, afraid of emptiness. Because we are used to believing that our value comes from being busy, from doing more, trying harder, appearing everywhere. But in truth, the soul does not recover in noise. Music, it recovers in stillness. Jung once wrote, "In each of us, there is another whom we do not know. He speaks to us in dreams and tells us how differently he sees us from the way we see ourselves." In silence, the unconscious begins the work of healing that the conscious mind cannot do. When you stop, suppressed emotions have the chance, music, to breathe. Tangled thoughts have the space to settle. You do not need to try to be okay right away. You do not need to believe that music must be strong. The more you try to be peaceful, the more pressure music create. Peace does not come from effort. It comes from allowing yourself to stop, to not have to solve everything immediately, to simply exist for a few moments music without needing to do anything. I once knew a woman who was always strong, always a support for others. She was used to being the problem solver, the responsible music one, the one who always had to be okay. But one day, after too much pressure, she no longer cried, no longer grew angry. She only felt empty. She went to a park, sat on a bench, and did nothing. No music, no calls, no trying to understand her feelings. Just sat. At first, she felt uncomfortable, as if she was wasting time. But after a while, her breath slowed, her chest loosened, her shoulders relaxed, and she said something very small, very true. "It feels like my soul just came back to me." Sometimes silence does not escape. It returns. There is an image that may help you visualize this. If you drop a leaf into a rushing stream, the leaf will spin and collide and drift without direction. But when the water is calm, the leaf does not need to try. It naturally finds its path. When the mind is too loud, you cannot hear the deepest part of yourself. But when you stop, even for a few minutes, the unconscious begins reorganizing everything. Sadness finds its name. Fear has space to breathe. The heart returns to its natural rhythm. When you are exhausted from having to be strong, having to try, music, having to keep everything under control, you do not need grand rituals to find peace. You do not need 3-0-minute meditation sessions every day. Music. You do not need to escape to the mountains, leave everything behind, or change your life all at music once. Stillness begins with very small things. One moment when you turn off the music, and music, let the room be quiet. One meal you eat without looking at your phone. One afternoon where you simply watch the sunlight change on the wall. 1 minute where you place your hand on your chest and just breathe music without trying to understand anything, fix anything, or become anyone. In those moments that seem like doing nothing, what is truly happening is music. You are creating space for the soul to return. Jung believed that within every person there is a center deeper than the ego music, which he called the self. The ego is the part that wants to control, to explain, to succeed, music to be recognized. The self is the part that knows who you are when you are not straining for anyone. And the interesting thing is the ego speaks only in noise while the self speaks only in silence. This is why stillness is not emptiness. Stillness is the space where the truth inside you can finally be heard. Then one day you will realize something strange and beautiful. When you stop, life does not collapse like you feared. Nothing breaks. The people you thought would not be okay without you somehow still manage. The world music continues to move. The river continues to flow according to its own rhythm. And you, for the first time in many exhausted music days, feel that you no longer have to strain in every breath. And if right now something in your chest softens even just a little, that is not a coincidence. That is your soul responding. A very gentle invitation. It is time to pause, not to give up, not to escape, not to surrender, but to return to yourself where you have always belonged, though you may have wandered far away for a long time. Number 6. When you are exhausted, don't search for a big meaning. Return to small anchors. When you have gone through the exhaustion of pushing yourself, the exhaustion of wearing a mask, the exhaustion of controlling and resisting yourself, a natural question appears. So, what do I do now? But in that very moment, many people make a familiar mistake. They try to search for a big music answer. They begin seeking the meaning of life, destiny, life purpose, or some grand awakening that will change everything music at once. But when you are exhausted, big questions do not help you get up. They only make you more tired. Carl Jung once emphasized, "The least of things with a meaning is worth more in life than the greatest of things without it." Meaning that the soul is not nourished by grand theories, music, or impressive truths, but by the smallest things that have presence, music, breath, and a feeling of being alive. When you are tired, what you need is not to understand music life, but to return to what is slow and real. I once heard the story of a girl who spent a long period feeling so exhausted that when she woke up each morning, she no longer felt she belonged to the world. Not severe depression, not collapse, just emptiness beneath every effort. She tried reading self-help books, watching motivational videos, searching for life philosophy, trying to understand how to change her life. But the more she thought, the more tired she became, until one day she stopped trying. She simply made a cup of warm water and sat by the window. She watched the morning light fall across her hand, and she realized something she had never noticed before. Her body was still alive, and tears fell. Not from pain, but because for the first time in a long time, she felt herself here. That is a small anchor. Music. Small anchors are the simplest things we often overlook, but they have the ability to bring the music soul back to the body, the mind back to the present, the heart back to life. Breath, morning light. The scent of freshly washed clothes, the sound music of water running in the sink. A sip of warm water, the feeling of fingertips touching a wooden surface. Not grand things, real things. If you notice, artists who have gone through deep emotional exhaustion have found revival not in victory or success, but in very small rhythms. Remember Virginia Woolf, who lived with music, deep inner worlds, and many emotional wearinesses. There were times she could not write, could not live, could not find any meaning strong enough to hold her to life. But she did not force herself to become radiant again immediately. Music. She began with small things. The sound of waves outside the window, the shadow of a tree moving across the ground, the sound of a spoon touching a porcelain cup in the morning. She wrote about these small things, and those small things kept her alive for many years. That was not healing. That was returning. And here is an important truth. Revival never begins with grand transformations. It begins with very small, very slow music, very human rhythms. You do not need to feel better. You only need to feel a little present. Just a little is enough to begin. Try this not as a music technique, but as a way to return. When you are so tired, you do not want to try anymore. Do not ask, "What should I do with my life?" Ask instead, "Can I take one slow breath?" Begin with one small thing, one slow breath, present and unforced. Let the morning light touch your skin as if it is reminding you that life is still happening whether you are trying or not. Let your hands hold a warm cup and feel the heat spread slowly to your fingertips. Fold your blanket slowly, as if you are gently gathering the scattered parts of yourself, music, without rushing, without aiming to be productive. And when you place your hand over your chest, feel your heartbeat. Not to analyze or conclude anything, but simply to recognize that you are still alive, still here, still present in this very moment of your life. That is how exhaustion fades and peace returns. Not by pursuit, but by allowing it to come music back on its own. And when you return to those small anchors, you will realize something many people spend their whole lives to understand. You do not need to search for meaning. Meaning will find you softly like breath. Because real meaning has never lived in big answers, but in your ability, music, to be present in the moment unfolding right now. And if you feel that, gently, like a small inner nod, click like on this video, not just to support me, but to remind yourself that small things matter. Number 7. You do not need to save yourself. You need to stop preventing life from saving you. When you are exhausted to the point that you no longer want to try, perhaps you have believed, I have to save myself. No one can help me. And from that moment, you begin to strain. You read more books, watch more videos, try to understand the problem, try to stand up straighter, try to behave well, try to be okay again. But the more you try, the more drained music you become. The more you want to escape, the more you feel stuck within your own effort. And in that very moment, the deepest reminder from Jung quietly appears. You do, music, not need to save yourself. You only need to stop resisting the process your soul is already carrying out in silence. The human being does not only know how to feel, it knows how to recover. Breath still happens even when you do not control it. Your heart still beats music, even when you are exhausted and passed out. A wound on your skin closes without you having to command it. The body knows how to return to balance, and the soul does, too. What hurts us is not that we don't know how to heal. What hurts us is that we do not allow ourselves to heal. Music, Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." The greatest privilege in life is not to become more capable, stronger, or more perfect, but to live music as yourself. The true self is not a better version you must strive to achieve. It is the place you return to when you stop trying to become someone else. We become exhausted when we try to live as a version our soul was not born to carry. Music. The more we perform, the further we drift from ourselves. Music. And within that distance, exhaustion begins to grow. I once knew a woman named Clara. She worked tirelessly for many years, always trying to be the strong one, the one who could carry everything. Music. The one who was not allowed to collapse. She believed that if she just tried a little harder, music became a little better, held on a little longer, everything would eventually be okay. Music. Until one day, her body suddenly collapsed. In the hospital, the doctor said something very gentle, but touching the deepest place. Your body is not weak. You just never allowed it to rest. Clara said that during those days lying there doing nothing, trying nothing, not having to hold herself together, she felt peaceful for the first time in a very long time. Not because she found a grand answer, not because she awakened, but because she stopped fighting herself. She simply breathed, simply lay there, simply allowed her body and soul to reorganize themselves. And that very not doing was what began healing her. This is the strangest thing. Healing does not happen when you try to do something big. It happens, music, when you stop doing it. Neuroscience calls this the natural recovery state of the nervous system. When you stop straining, the parasympathetic system activates, the heart rate slows, the breath deepens, the muscles loosen. The brain begins to process emotions and memories, not through thinking, but through returning to presence. As you already know, a plant does not grow faster just because you pull it upward. It grows when you do not interfere with its growth. Humans are the same. We do not grow by forcing ourselves to become stronger or to overcome faster, but by allowing ourselves to unfold music according to our own natural rhythm. Peace is not something you must chase. Peace does not run from you. It is something that returns when you stop chasing it. So when you are exhausted with everything, remember this: you do music not need to save yourself. You do not need to find special strength, nor do you need to get up quickly or prove you are okay. Life has always been there quietly and gently, trying to lift you for a very long time. Just like breath continues even when you are not watching it. Just like the heart keeps beating music even in your darkest moments. You are not lost. You are simply pausing on your way home to yourself. The only thing you need right now is not to try harder, but to music open the tightly clenched hand so that life has a place to enter, to touch you, and to lift you up naturally, slowly, kindly. If right now, while reading these words, you feel something inside your chest soften even a little, even just a small warmth, a slower music breath, that is not coincidence. It is a sign that you are no longer fighting yourself, and just that music is already a rebirth. When you are tired of everything, what you are experiencing is not the end, but a turning point where your music soul gently takes your hand and guides you back to yourself. Just like water after wind, music does not need to try to become calm. It only needs to be left undisturbed. You are the same. You do not need music to be stronger. Do not need to pretend to be okay. Do not need to move forward quickly. Just one moment where you pause and breathe, and life has already begun quietly rearranging everything inside you. If you notice, the deepest transformations have never come from dramatic changes. They come from very ordinary moments. One slow breath, one quiet morning, one moment where you admit that you are tired. Within that softness, the true music self begins to return, not loudly, not brightly, but gently and fully. And now, as these words fade into the background, as your breath becomes softer, slower, more distant, there's nothing left to understand, nothing left to fix, nothing left to become. You came here tonight carrying the weight of who you thought you had to be, and somewhere in this darkness, you've begun to set it down. The old ego that served you for so long, thank it now and let it rest. The mask you wore to survive, acknowledge it and let it fall. The exhaustion you've been fighting, stop fighting and let it teach you. Because tonight isn't about transformation. Tonight is about permission. Permission to be tired. Permission to be uncertain. Permission to simply be. Carl Jung knew something most of us forget, that the soul doesn't heal in the light of day, under the pressure of productivity and expectation. It heals here, in the quiet, in the dark, in the space between waking and sleeping, where you don't have to explain yourself to anyone, not even to yourself. So as you drift now, let these final words settle over you like a gentle blanket. You are not broken, you are not lost, you are simply returning. Returning to the truest part of yourself that has been waiting patiently beneath all the noise, beneath all the striving, beneath all the years of pretending. And when you wake tomorrow, you don't need to be different. You don't need to have all the answers. You only need to remember this moment, this breath, this small sacred permission to be exactly where you are. Thank you for being here tonight, fellow Jungian. Thank you for choosing stillness over noise. If this video helped you in any way, consider subscribing Jung at Night. Thank you for letting your soul finally rest. Until we meet again in the space between consciousness and dream, sleep well. You are already home.